talk about change, impermanent, and so weather has changed. So again, I would like to start with a short mindful breathing exercise to quiet our mind, to bring our mind in the moment, and then trying to generate good intention for being here. Make yourself relax, comfortable. And feel the weight of your body on cushions. And let your breath in a natural state. And then try to watch the breath mindfully and try to be aware of that. Once your mind has settled down, then we can reflect, contemplate how fortunate and lucky that I am to have this precious human life, which is full of potentials if we utilize it correctly and properly. If we use it in the right way, not only we can achieve temporary happiness, temporary mental peace, we can achieve permanent, ultimate peace. Not only that, we can even achieve the ultimate happiness of fully awakened state, the most perfect and complete state and happiness. Not only we can achieve ultimate peace and happiness for ourselves, but we can lead others to that permanent happiness and peace. There's so much potential. And not only we have achieved that precious human life now, we have met the Dharma, which is very rare, not easy. Not only met the Dharma, we have met directly, indirectly, incredible teachers such as His own Dalai Lama, David Lama Sabar Rinpoche, and all others great masters. So fortunate, lucky that we have gathered all the right conducive conditions to practice the Dharma, which is extremely rare. And even though we have all this right condition, conducive right condition at the moment, that might not last forever. Therefore, I must make most of it while all the conditions are right at the moment. To dedicate myself, to put more effort into engage in practice of the Dharma. That means transforming our mind. Trying to reduce and eliminate those disturbing negative emotions. And making all the effort to cultivate and improve and increase those helpful, beneficial, positive state of mind. And to engage for the success of the practice, we need all the blessings of all the gurus, Buddhas. So you can visualize your root guru in the form of Buddha Shakyamuni in front of you, above you, the space. As we recite the Buddha Shakyamuni's mantra 3 times from the heart of Buddha Shakyamuni and the guardians of mantras, white light nectar flow into yourself, cleanse, purify all the illness or potential for illness, all the negative karma, delusion, obscurations, completely. And receiving all the blessings of the enlightened body, speech, and mind, especially all the spiritual realizations. Taya tha o mune ma monaye so. Taya tha o mune ma monaye so. Taya tha o mune ma monaye so. Imagine, visualize all the illness, all the negative karma, all the disillusion, all the obscuration, and completely cleanse, purify. And receive all the blessings of the enlightened body, speech, and mind, especially all the spiritual realizations. So we do the refuge and bodhicitta in the mandala. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmatter beings. Sangye chodan choge chonam la, chanju padu dani kyapsu che, dagi chonyen jibe sonam ge, dola penje sangye lupa sho. Sangye chodan choge chonam la, chanju padu dani kyapsu che, dagi chunyen gibe sonam ge, dola penje sangye dupash. Short mandala. We do one in English and then chant in Tibetan. This ground anointed perfume, stone with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon, and imagine this Buddha land and offer it. May all transmigrants beings enjoy this pure land. Sa shi pe ki chun shin me to dhamma ri ra le chi nyen de gen pa de sangye shen tu mi de wai do namata shen je pa sho Idam Guru So the topic of this weekend, today and tomorrow, is the sixth paramita. And the sixth paramita are the very hard practice of the bodhisattvas. The main practice or the hard practice of the bodhisattvas. And bodhisattvas are those who have cultivated this incredible altruistic intention of bodhicitta, in order to liberate all sentient beings from all their suffering and cause of suffering, in order to lead to the ultimate happiness, the wish to achieve, their own highest potential, fully awakened state, in order to do that. So the inspiration to achieve fully enlightenment, driven by the great compassions, to free all sentient beings from all their suffering and cause of suffering, and to lead them to ultimate happiness. So, and those are the bodhisattvas, and someone who have cultivated such mind, at the very beginning, of course, we train to develop such attitude, such mind, with the effort. We make effort because that kind of mind or attitude doesn't arise spontaneously, naturally. You have to contemplate, meditate with the effort. And as you meditate and more, and then it slowly becomes more and more easier, more and more familiarity and easier, and then it requires less and less effort, like in a lot of other things, and slowly then you are able to have that attitude, that mind, effortlessly. Even when you are not trying to put effort to meditate, that attitude, that mind just comes naturally, spontaneously, day and night, effortless, day and night. And when that happens, then the persons or any beings who have that become bodhisattvas, and that is the bodhisattvas, And then, the main practice of the bodhisattvas is then to engage into the six perfections. So the six perfections or the six paramita are the main practice, the hard practice of the bodhisattvas. And those who are on the path of Mahayana or path to bodhisattvas, who have inclination, inspirations to become a bodhisattva, the practice of six paramita is the key. So the six paramita are, the paramita of generosity, the paramita of moral or ethical discipline, the paramita of patience, the paramita of perseverance, and the paramita of concentrations, in paramita with the wisdom. So those are the six paramitas. And it is mentioned in the scriptures, Lamrim and other scriptures, each of the previous paramita are more easy to practice than following paramita. And that is why when Buddha explained those six paramita, the sequences, generosity coming first, and then moral discipline and patience and so forth, because the practice of generosity is more easier than the practice of moral discipline. Whereas then moral discipline practice is more easier than the practice of patience and so forth. In general, of course, individuals, some people might find certain other practice more easier than others because of their past imprint, their past practice, familiarity in that. But in general, that is how it is, and that is why it is explained. And also, it's explained that each of previous, when you engage in the practice of each of those six paramita, and when you are familiar and when with those practice, and when you're good at that practice, then that serves as a foundation for the next practice. When you have strong foundation of good practice of generosity, it helps you to develop the paramita of first moral discipline. So again, each of the previous paramita act as a foundation to develop the next paramitas. So it supports, And for example, when we practice generosity, the paramita of generosity, and when you started to be good at that practice, then through the practice of generosity, you begin to, become less. And when you started to be good at that practice, then through the practice of generosity, you begin to, become less attachment, less greedy, less miserliness towards the objects. You learn to let it go, and you becoming good at letting it go, and to be able to share, to be able to give without holding it too tightly, grasping too tightly. And when you are good at that, when you have reached a point where you are able to do that, then it helps to develop better practice or moral discipline. Because when you have less greediness, less attachment, then it is easier to keep moral discipline and practice moral discipline. At the moment, one of the reasons why we are unable to engage in the moral or ethical discipline well, purely, is because of a lot of time is due to greediness, attachments, So that is how, and okay. So starting with the practice of, the paramita of generosity. The practice of generosity is training your mind, training your mind to share and to give, training your mind to be able to share and to be able to give, the thought to give, the thought to share, training to have that strong mind, that strong attitude of the wish, the thought to give, to share without any hesitation, without any attachment, and without any expectations. It's through such training, the mind, through training your mind of generosity, then, you develop a sense of mind of abundance, feeling of abundance, feeling of that you have more than enough to share, to give. And when you have that feelings of abundance, that you have more than enough to share and give, then you become fearless or less fear of letting it go, to give, to share. At the moment, we are unable to give, unable to share. Sometimes even when we have enough to share and give, because we are fearful. We are fearful because we have this mind, I don't have enough. Even when there is enough, in our mind, it's not enough. In our mind, it feels like I don't have enough to share and to give. So it is due to that mind. And when you feel that you don't have enough to give and share, and then that is when the fear arises. If I give, share, what will be left for me? What will be left? And that is that kind of the mind is that hold us back from being able to practice generosity, to be able to give, to be able to share. So that is main practice, is training your mind. And when you have that mind, then, when you do have whatever you have, you will be able to share and give easily. And not only give and share, you are able to give and share with joy, happiness. Joy and happiness, Therefore, Shantideva, as he explained, these thoughts, if I give this to someone, what will be left for me? That is attitude we have sometimes, fear. If I share this, if I give to that, then what will be left for me? There's fear of that. That kind of attitude is selfish attitude. And that kind of attitude is that because we have not trained our mind of generosity enough. On the other hand, when you have trained your mind to become a generous, and when you are well at that, then the attitude is very different. The attitude is, if I use it for myself, what will be left for me to share with others? If I use this for myself, if I eat this for myself, what will be left there for me to share with someone, to give to someone? That attitude is divine attitude, or the bodhisattva attitude, selfless attitude, as Shandev. And so there are those kind of two attitudes, and those two attitude arises because of one being very trained and one has not trained. It's not about how much we have. It's more about, how generous our mind is. And again, we often hear, we often experience, see, all over the world, it's not about the generosity. It's not about how much you have. Generosity is about how much, how open your mind is, how generous your mind is, so that you feel you have abundance and to share. And sometimes you see, people who have most little are the most generous. I was watching one of the news, during the earthquake. There was a big earthquake in Nepal, 1915, and there was many journalists covering those events. And I think it was BBC, someone who was in a place where they had he was covering news from that area where most of the house was gone. Not only house was gone, because most of the house was, made out of mud and so forth, and they collapsed, brick and mud collapsed. And all the food that they have saved also there, And so the journalist saw someone, the news reporter saw someone, elderly lady, who was trying to save some of the rice and others that was gone, and very little that there was left, very little, much left, not so much, And so she invited the reporter to have the meal together, and insisting, that. And such is generous when you have lost everything, and this is what is left, very small that you have left, even in that moment, even in such situations, in case, she was so generous. And the reporter was so much touched by that, the act of generosity of that elderly lady, so much, and so this is only one of them, you see very often like that, and Buddha explained in one of the sutras, he tells the monks, says, you don't understand the incredible power of the generosity, benefit and power of the generosity. If you understand the power of generosity, the benefit of generosity, that even it is your last meal that you have, you will not eat it without sharing with someone. And this remind me of that, the Buddha's teachings in one of those sutras, and this lady's generosity kind of reminds of that, the Buddha's teachings, So generosity is not about the object itself, it's about the thought, it's about the thought. Of course, when you have thought and when you have the object to give and share, you will definitely do it. If you don't have the thought to give and to share, then even you will not be able to share, you will not be able to give. So it comes first training your mind to be able to give, to be able to share, and perfecting and completing the paramita of generosity is training your mind to such that, you have perfected and completed the thought to give. Whether you have the object to give or not, but when you are perfected the thought to give and share and complete it, then you complete the practice of generosity. You perfect the practice of generosity. You complete the practice of generosity. So someone, even, who have nothing, object, external object to give, nothing, still they can perfect and complete the practice of generosity by perfecting that mind, that thought. And when you perfect and complete that thought, if you do have something to give, then you will definitely be able to give without any hesitations. There is a stories of, a person's, who is having a very difficult with practice of generosity, not being able to give, share, during the Buddha's time, who was having a very, very difficult practice of generosity, And so Buddha, taught that person's at the very beginning, training is all about training, from giving from one hand to another hand, just so, let's say, one coins, $1, from one hand to another, imagining is someone else, giving that, imagining someone else giving that, and slowly, the persons become more and more easy. And at the very beginning, even that was difficult, and slowly, familiarity, and then slowly, the Buddha encouraged to give something very small, not something very big, but very something small to someone that she feel close to, And so again, then she tried to do that, something very small where she feel very someone who is close to her. And slowly, through such practice, then she was able to give more, and then to others as well. And so that is, again, when you train, then something which seems very difficult at the one time, one can overcome that. As here in terms of generosity, that is, so the practice of generosity is, antidote towards this negative mind, delusional mind of greediness, miserliness, holding too tightly and not being able to let it go, not wanting to let it go, not wanting to give and share, So is so when you have that kind of greediness and miserliness, No matter how much you have, you suffer. You suffer. Once suffer, no matter how much you have, as long as you have this strong miserly greediness, because you always, externally you have so much, internally you feel you have so little. Because you feel you have so little, not enough. Therefore, you suffer because of that mental state, attitude of that, the poor mental attitude, regardless of how much you have externally. On the other hand, someone who might have very little, but they have this attitude of rich attitude, of that I have more than enough. So they feel very happy because of feeling wealth inside. Not poor, but wealthy inside. And so therefore, when you have that practice of generosity, the more we develop the practice of generosity, the more stronger practice we have, the more joy we develop, because we feel so rich inside, because we feel so wealthy inside. On the other hand, the miserliness, make you unhappy because of that poor mentality, feeling that you don't have enough. Also, the practice of generosity, as His Holiness Lama said, is one of the clear external expressions of compassion. When you have compassion, sense of love, sense of care, sense of concerns for someone's well-being, someone's happiness, that manifests in the form of these external expressions of being generous, to give, to share, that can reduce someone's pain, sufferings, that can relieve someone's pain, suffering, that can elevate someone's pain, sufferings, So it can be expressions of that loving kindness, sense of care, concern for others' well-being, as well as that generosity become cause of, loving kindness, compassion, care. So it is a antidote towards being careless, mean, indifference, unconcerned. The practice of generosity is opposite of that. Instead of careless, it's an act of being care. It's attitude of being careful, concern, care, not indifference, but concern. Not a mean, but loving, caring. So one of the things when you do try to practice the generosity, is important to train our mind, not to have any kind of expectations. When we try to help, when we try to give, when we try to share, try to do without any expectations. Because when you have expectations, that act of caring, generosity, love can turn into disappointment, sometimes bitter, sometimes even anger, later. Because when we give or share or practice generosity with certain conditions, when those conditions are not met, when such expectations are not met, then sometimes we get very disappointed. Later it becomes disappointing. In some cases, not only disappointment, it can become cause of bitterness. Not only bitterness, sometimes anger, and sometimes, it can become cause for us to become generous anymore. So therefore, when we give, we try to give with the best intentions, without any expectation, without any conditions, so much conditions, expectations, without any reward or conditions or expectations. And then we try to, of course, with all the practice. Of course, if you are bodhisattvas, your practice of generosity is always motivated by bodhicitta mind. It comes out of that bodhicitta mind. But for us who are not bodhisattvas and who have the interest and inclination to a bodhisattva path, and we're trying to practice generosity, then we try to generate bodhicitta mind, as a motivation for giving or for sharing or to practice generosity. Because, your practice of generosity, whether it become cause of enlightenment, fully enlightenment, whether it become cause of just a individual liberation, or whether it become cause of better future life and well in the future, or whether it become cause of better in this life. It all depends on the motivations. Even though practice might be the same practice, you are practicing generosity, giving, but due to your motivations, it can bring different result, different level of result. What kind of result it brings, it depends on a lot. It depends on the motivation, the right intention, the motivations, and the highest intention motivations. The highest intention motivation is bodhicitta motivations. Even though what you are practicing is generosity to help one individual person, whether it's maybe one group or whether one individual. Even what you are trying to, in actions, what you are trying to help is one person, but when you practice, your motivation to help and benefit all sentient beings. In order to be help and benefit to all sentient beings, in order to liberate each and every sentient beings from all their suffering and cause of suffering, in order to lead each and every sentient being to fully enlightenment, ultimate happiness. For that purpose, I'm going to practice this generosity of whatever I'm giving them. So you are helping immediately someone to reduce their suffering, pain, but through that motivation, you have directed that practice towards the well-being of all sentient beings. And that is the same. A lot of time we practice generosity in our life with so many things. But a lot of time we just do it without any intention motivations. Isn't it? Probably you are feeding your dogs every day. And that is practice of generosity. You are giving them food. Maybe you are feeding water for the birds, or seeds for the birds, or some others. you do quite regularly, but probably we don't have any intention, motivation each time we do that. So it's something that we have to develop. Mindful, develop that when you, before you give, you try to have that bodhisattva motivations. Of course, sometimes we can have more extensive, sometimes you can have very short, but, and so, whatever practice of generosity you do, every day, or when you send a check for whoever, for a center or for something else, for any cause, sometimes maybe, we hear about disasters and that, and sometimes you feel you want to contribute, you want to help, you want to send a check, and sometimes we just write a check. Of course, there is a sense of compassion, sense of care, concern that you wanted to help. You feel that the suffering of there because of that, and you wanted to help towards that. But on top of that, if you can develop even more bodhisattva motivations for all sentient beings, it becomes even more broader and more beneficial. And these are the something that, is not so difficult. We just have to remind ourselves. We just have to remind ourselves. And if you remind yourself at the very beginning, sometimes we remember, sometimes we forget. Like everything. Sometimes you can remember, you are able to develop that intentions. Sometimes you forget, that is okay. But you try to remind yourself. And slowly, you get in that habit. Your mind get in that habit. And then every time you do, you remember and you try to have that intentions, motivation. Then it doesn't require so much effort after sometimes. Because, it kind of become part of your thinking, And that is same with everything, I think that is same with everything, even in small physical actions, things, very simple things like brushing, But when we grow up, we brush only in the morning, we never brush in the evening. uh, I guess we are not taught, or maybe I don't know exactly, so when I went to see doctor, then this, they asked whether how often I brush, and I said, every morning. Then he said, and you have to brush evening, and so at the very beginning, I wanted to do that, so I brush one day, and for 1 day or 2 days I forget, because it's not something that I do every day. So I have to remind myself. Some days I remember, some days I forget for some time, and slowly, I remember more and more, and slowly, I'm able to do every day. And now, no matter how busy you are, wherever you are, you don't forget to do that. It has become just routine in your life. It doesn't require. At the very beginning, it feels like so much effort. At the very beginning, it feels like so much effort. Now it doesn't feel like any effort. It's just a routine in your life, I think. And that is same. That is same. I remember also same with, Lama Rinpoche's, when he came to Sera, he gave some advice to us, the Gopan monks who were studying there. And he emphasized very much on the importance of generating the bodhisattva motivation when you go to the pujas, when you go for the debate, when you go to receive teachings, because this is something that we do every day, We go to the debate classes a couple of times a day. You go to the pujas every mornings and some other times. Sometimes we go and receive teaching from our teachers, But a lot of times, sometimes we forget to have the motivation to do that. So Rinpoche emphasized very much. And so at the very beginning, again, it requires a lot of effort because it's not something even with that, your intention, motivation to that, you put effort, and some days you remember, some days you forget. And then slowly, it feels like a lot of effort. At the very beginning, it feels like a lot of effort. But slowly, again, it becomes kind of like routine in general, and then it doesn't feel like any kind of effort. It becomes easy. And I think that is same, I think, so I just want to kind of remind that. And also when you practice, so the motivations and then the practice of generosity, whatever practice of generosity, in terms of practice of generosity, we can practice the generosity of material wealth, help, for those who need material help, wealth, and where you have, where you have something to help, to give, to share, the practice of generosity, as well as the practice of generosity of sharing the knowledge, the Dharma, whatever, even is not as something physical material, but something internal knowledge, experiences, that include, all the different knowledge that one might have, that when someone needs those knowledge, and when you have something to give, then, again, sharing and giving those knowledge, those education, those knowledge, experience, informations, whatever, as well as the practice of, the generosity of the practice of sharing your virtues, whatever virtues that we have created, whatever merit or the virtues that we have created, we can always dedicate and share and give to others. Due to whatever virtues that I have created in 3 times, and especially now, if someone needs some help to recover from illness, may he or she recover quickly from that illness, may he or she have success, whatever success they need, may he or she have developed the spiritual realization. That is something they want, their struggles they want to have. So you can dedicate all your virtues and merit, and that dedicating is kind of sharing and giving, instead of wanting the result from that merit virtue just for myself, but you dedicate that for others. And that is where, in one of the sutras, Buddhas talk about, give you example of, by sharing your virtues and the merit, it doesn't reduce your merit and virtues. Instead, it can increase. And so when you light with one light, with 1,000 light. Because you light 1,000 light, it doesn't mean that light has become less. Whether you light 1,000 or you don't light any others with that one light. And similarly, when you give and when you share and when you practice the generosity through such dedication, giving all your virtues, by sharing that to others, and it doesn't reduce your level. Instead, it can instead increase. So practicing generosity in that, and practicing the generosity of giving fearless protections, love. Those who feel insecure, giving them protections. Those who feel insecure and fearful, giving them fearless protections. Those who feel lonely, uncared, unloved, giving them love. Practicing the generosity of love. And I think especially in our modern time, that need to be more. There's so much need of that. In modern time, I think more than the material needs, there seem to be the needs of the true love, compassion, care. So many people experience so much pain, suffering, struggles because of not being able to feel, even though they have material things, but they still feel lonely because they never feel they got enough love, compassion, sense of care. Not being able to feel that seems to be one of the problems in our society, in our modern society. Be it child, sometimes the children's, maybe they get all the, toys they want, play, but maybe they might not feel the love. Maybe sometimes the parents are too busy, with things to really show and express that love, compassion, and care. And sometimes maybe the child grow up feeling not getting enough love, compassion. And that is, because that has been one thing that has bothered, or something that has in my mind, trying to understand why, in the modern times, the children get so much things that where in the old time they didn't get. During our time, they had any toys, any things. Parents didn't have anything to kind of really afford to give any of that. Whereas the younger generation, they get all this, but when they grow up, there is sense of lack of appreciation for the parent. There's lack of appreciation for the parent. There's sense of not feeling the kindness of the parent. And I always wondered, they should be able to feel more kindness because the parents are doing so much for them. Like when we grow, we're by ourselves, My parents, they went and we are by ourselves. There's no one to drive here, no one to pick up here, no one, it's all by yourself. And all still in that kind of older generations, there's sense of feeling the kindness of parent, appreciations of their kindness. But the younger generations doesn't feel that so much. And I always was curious and wondering why, because they should feel more because they are getting more attention in that. But sometimes maybe, we just provide the external things, but not really enough true giving enough time and spending with time and compassion in that way. And maybe because of that, maybe they are not feeling that the love and compassions. I don't know, but that is something that it hit my mind. I wonder why. I still struggles a little bit on that. So yeah, that was I was talking about we were talking about the generosity of the loving kindness. Showing, giving the love. And like every practice, if we can seal with the understanding of emptiness, then again the practice become much more powerful. The practice of generosity become much more powerful when you practice the generosity. Again, by seeing the object that you are giving is empty of inherent existence, you yourself who is engaging in this practice of generosity, empty of inherent existence, to whom you are giving, the other persons, is also empty of inherent existence. The act of giving itself is empty of inherent existence. So by bringing that the wisdom realizing emptiness or that part, then the practice of generosity becomes much more powerful, and also it helps not to be arrogant. Sometimes when we practice generosity, when you don't have that wisdom, sometimes it can bring arrogant, or I'm so generous and that person is not generous. Sense of feeling superiority. I'm generous person and that person is not generous. Sense of kind of looking down a little bit on other persons based on what you practice and based on what the other doesn't practice. That can arises. And when that arises, then again, it pollutes your practice. The practice of generosity being a little bit polluted because of that. And so again, if we can bring that practice within that, then that makes practice more powerful, and it will not allow for the sense of arrogance to arise through that understanding, that practice. And then, as we mentioned, dedicating, for all sentient beings, dedicating for enlightenment, for the well-being of all sentient beings, for whatever practice that you engage in. And so that we try to bring that aspect to all the other practice, the motivations, bodhicitta motivations, and then seal with the wisdom, and then dedicating for all sentient beings and well-being all sentient beings, and towards enlightenment for the well-being of all sentient beings. So those practice, that we try to bring that, apply that same practice to all other paramitas, to the moral discipline, the paramita moral discipline, to the practice when you practice paramita of patience, paramita of joyous effort, paramita of concentration or meditation, and paramita of wisdom. You try to apply that to all of them, and then all those practices become much more meaningful. Any questions, comments so far regarding first paramita? Yes, please.
With the practice of emptiness, the recipient of the generosity, practicing empty of inherent existence, you yourself, the object itself. Did you also say the act of generosity is also empty of inherent existence?
The act of generosity, yeah. So whatever practice you are doing, the act of being generous, the act of practicing moral discipline, the act of practicing the patience, all of that, yeah. Because again, we can feel my act of this practice, the act of generosity or act of practicing moral discipline or act of patience is something more superior, we can get again kind of grasping to that too, to that action itself, the act itself, the practice itself. Yeah. Maybe not to the object that, let's say, if I give a food for someone, maybe not attached to that food, but I might get attached or grasping to this act of being generous, or practice of the generous. So therefore, not to have any grasping or attachment to any of those, and we'll try to see the emptiness of all of them. Yeah. Yes, please.
In my experience, sometimes the intention, the act of trying to create the intention of bodhicitta can be very abstract.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question for you is it okay to think something like, well, maybe by doing this, like the light example, maybe by doing this, then this person goes and does something else, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that one way of thinking about bodhicitta, or is the abstraction right?
I think at the very beginning it might feel abstract because because it's not something so natural for us. But again, to reach a point where it becomes natural, we have to start from where it is abstract. So, if we think, it is too abstract at the moment, then we can never reach a point where it becomes more natural after some time. I guess it is something like, isn't there? I think there is one English expressions, fake until you make it. Similar like that, abstract, it feels like we are just faking it because it's not natural at the moment. It almost feel like you are faking it, and then it becomes abstract. But you have to do that until you make it and it becomes natural. Then you don't have to feel like that, And so therefore, again, I think even though it required a little bit effort, even though it feel like a little bit kind of abstract, even though it feel like a little bit like you are kind of making up or almost like faking up, but then again, you have to do that. And I think that is same with all other practice. Even when someone is trying to do Tonglen practice, it feel like you're faking it, because but slowly when someone get good at that, then they really feel like they are really taking it. There's no more, it becomes so natural, and so it starts with something more, it starts with almost like fake and abstract to reach point where it is no more faking, no more abstract, and become more natural. Then the next we go to the next paramita, the paramita of moral discipline. And then the practice of moral discipline is, antidote or encounter, unhealthy, harmful physical actions, verbal actions, and mental state, or mental actions. So basically, the moral discipline is trying to avoid and abandon from any action through any of the three doors, body, speech, and mind, that brings pain, suffering, harm, hurt to others and oneself. As Buddha said, do not hurt harm by taking your own example, your own bodies. In other words, just as how you don't want others to treat you, you don't treat others. Just as you want how others to treat you, you try to treat others that way. So, we don't want someone to take your life, so we try to avoid taking the life of others. If someone tries to take your life, there will be a lot of pain, sufferings, and you regard your life precious. You hold it very precious. In the same way, then we also, with your understanding of that, then you regard all life is precious. Everyone holds their life as precious, just as you hold your life precious. Just as you don't want to get hurt, they don't want to get hurt. And with such understanding, then we try to avoid and abandon taking the life of others consciously, knowingly. Same way, avoiding the stealings, avoiding sexual misconduct that disturb others' families. Yeah, you don't want to disturb your families and divide and break your family. Just as you don't want to see that, you don't want to engage in an action that create that for others' families. So through that you avoid, same way you don't want to be lie. So therefore, when someone lie to you, you get hurt, you feel sad, you feel pain. Someone lie to you, someone was not truthful. In the same way with that, then we try to avoid lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, and meaningless, idle gossips that only increase, afflictive emotions, such as jealousy, attachments, anger, and so forth. So we don't want to engage any things that will increase your own and others' afflictive emotions. A lot of those idle gossips or meaningless speech are like that. We talk about things that only increase jealousy, or sometimes, it increase jealousy. Sometimes it increase attachment. Sometimes it increase anger. You talk about someone, how bad that person, this person, and then, it makes everyone more upset and more angry. And so that kind of those afflictive, anything that increase those afflictive emotions, we try to avoid that, and then, covetousness or greediness, mental state, ill will feeling, or hatred, anger, and wrong views, because a lot of those hurtful, harmful action that we create through body and speech, it comes because of those mental state, And so therefore, we try to avoid and abandon those mental states as much as possible. Not only we try to avoid the physical behavior and verbal actions that really directly hurt and harm others, but we try to even stop from arising those mental state that lead to engage in such actions. So that is the moral discipline, and here the bodhisattva moral discipline is you try to avoid or abandon such harmful and hurtful actions, due to by restraining the selfish attitude and by engaging into cherishing thought for others, by engaging in cherishing thought because you are concerned for the well-being of others, because you care about the well-being of others, because you cherish others and others' well-beings. So therefore, you don't want to engage into any actions that could hurt, that could harm, that could bring pain and suffering to others. So the motivations why you avoid such actions that bring pain, suffering, hurt, to others is because you cherish others, because you care about others' well-beings, because you are concerned about their well-beings, So driven by that cherishing thought for others and by reframing the selfish attitude. Because if it is about selfish attitude, self-centeredness, then you don't care what happens to others. It's more about me, As long as it doesn't hurt me, I don't care if someone get hurt. As long as I don't suffer, I don't care whether someone else suffer it. As long as I'm happy, I don't care others suffer or not. That is the selfish attitude. Only care about oneself, one's well-being, and completely ignores others' well-being. So in the bodhisattva's training or moral discipline, you restrain and you refrain from that selfish attitude. Instead of acting out that selfish attitude, you act out of cherishing thought for others by being concerned and care and for others. And because of that concern and care for others, or because of that cherishing thought for others, therefore you try to avoid, and therefore you try to restrain from all these actions. Otherwise, that would bring so much pain and suffering to others directly and yourself through such action indirectly from karmic point of view. And so the moral discipline or ethical discipline, again, is the foundations for all other spiritual realizations. As Nagarjuna explained in his precious garland, the moral discipline is like the earth. The earth is the one that gives, foundations to all the beings and all the plants. All the plants arise because of the earth. All the beings survive because the earth is the very basic of all of that. In the same way, as the moral discipline is the very foundations, like the earth for all spiritual realizations. And especially, is the foundations for the practice of, meditative concentration and the wisdom. The three high training, the moral discipline, meditative concentration, wisdom. We need the wisdom to cut the afflictive emotions from the very root. In order to develop that special insight, you need to have meditative concentrations. In order to have a strong meditative concentration, then you need to have a strong foundations of moral discipline. If you don't have strong foundation of moral discipline, you cannot develop meditative concentration, shamatha. Without that shamatha, you cannot develop special insight. Without that, and so therefore, again, it's the very foundations of all those practice. So therefore, it becomes very root of all foundation, or the root of all the spiritual realizations. That is why, Buddha emphasized so much on his followers, the monks and nuns, the importance of that moral, ethical disciplines. So much emphasis is given on that, because that is a very root and foundations for the others' spiritual development or realizations. So in terms of moral discipline, or ethical or moral discipline of the bodhisattvas, we try to keep all the precepts that's related to the Bosha, bodhisattvas, or tantric, if we have taken, and keeping them that. So that is the moral discipline, that refrain from the misdeeds. And then there is a moral discipline, accumulating the virtues, On the basis of that moral discipline, then you engage into all other practice of other virtues, Engaging in other virtues that you have not actualized, and engage in the virtues, those you have already actualized, to increase, improve through different practice, meditations, contemplations, based on the foundation of that moral discipline. On top of that, then you engage and accumulate or engage in all other different virtues practice that supports in your path, and such as the other paramitas. On top of that, then you practice in generosity, you practice in patience, you practice in joyous effort in virtues, you practice in meditative concentration, wisdom, and so forth. Then there is a moral discipline of helping and benefiting others. So first, you try to restrain and refrain from misdeeds that bring harms, pain, suffering to others and oneself. Not only you restrain and refrain from harming others and yourself, next, you try to engage in all other virtues that can help you on your path. And not only you engage in all other virtues, it will help you in your growth, in your spiritual path, in your path. Now, when you have developed all these different realization, different tools, different virtues, now you try to help and benefit others. And that is the moral discipline of helping and benefiting others. So again, within these three moral discipline, there is sequences. The first act as a foundation for the next and next. With those two, then it gives you the tools and means to be help and benefit to others. So not only you don't harm them, you help and benefit them. And that is the bodhisattva's main practice. One of the difference between the arhat, who are on a path for more individual liberations, and the bodhisattva is even the arhat, they restrain and refrain from harming others. Even they engage into a moral discipline of refrain from misdeeds that hurts and harm others. That is more like kind of common practice for both bodhisattvas in that. But in helping and benefiting others, not only you don't harm and hurt others and restrain from harming others, but you try to help and benefit others. And that becomes more bodhisattvas practice, And so whatever way that you can help, benefit, whoever needs help, benefit, whoever needs help and benefit, and whatever way you can be help and benefit, then you try to do that. You try to as much as you can. Some things we might be able to help directly. Some things we might not be able to help directly. Then we try to be help benefit indirectly. Those which we cannot be help benefit directly, then we can try to help them indirectly, keeping in our prayer, keeping in our practice, meditations, dedicating and so forth in different ways, that we can try to contribute and help indirectly in that way. And to those which we can help directly, then we try to be as help and as much as possible. And then again, with this practice, also as I mentioned before, seal with the emptiness. Otherwise, again, someone can be very moral and ethical. Someone might be very moral and ethical, which is really wonderful and good, that we should be moral and ethical, but at the same time, it can be too arrogant. Sense of superiority. I'm so moral, I'm ethical, and that person is so unethical, so immoral, putting down others' sense of. And again, on one hand, you have these good qualities of being moral and ethical. On the other hand, because of that, you become arrogant and sense of superiority, and thereby belittling others, putting down others. So then it is like almost like two edges, One edge, it helps, one edge, it is harming. So how can we, while we try to practice, keep our moral and ethics pure, try to live your life morally, ethical, but how can we not allow ourselves to be feeling superiority and feeling better and belittling others or putting down others, looking down others in some ways? And that is, again, we need to seal that with emptiness. If we try to, seal with emptiness, there is no I that should feel more superiority. There's no others who is less than me, And the moral discipline itself, there's no inherent existing moral discipline that I should be so arrogant about it, and so therefore again, by applying that, and when in one of the prayers, I think in one of the Buddhas, when there is a sense of arrogance in your morality, then it becomes immoral, as it says. Then diminish your moral, ethical has been diminished by that feeling of arrogance, and so therefore not to be overtaken by sense of that arrogance. Then we try to. It's important. Try to meditate on emptiness. The emptiness of the practice of the practice of moral discipline is said. The objects to whom you practice moral discipline, you yourself will practice all of that. And then also, you try to dedicate all of them to fully enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And when you have a strong practice of moral discipline, then it will help. When you engage in the next practice of patience, it will help to develop better patience when you have a strong practice of moral discipline. When you through the practice of moral discipline, when you have been quite good at restraining or reframing or avoiding or abandoning, ill will feelings, such as ill will feeling or greediness or wrong views and so forth, a part of that ill will feeling, anger and hatred, when you started with then it helped when you practice the patience, when you practice the patience, we lose patience and we become impatient, when you try to help someone or try to be nice to someone, and then when they respond in a negative way, then you lose patience and you become impatient, But, if you have a strong practice of that moral discipline, not to be so easily angry and have upset and have ill will feeling and hatred, then you will not easily lose your patience and you will not easily become impatient. So therefore, that practice again act as the foundations or support for the next practice of the paramita of the patience. So before we stop, for lunch, any comments, any questions regarding the second paramita? You are good at the second paramita. Perfected and completed the second paramita. So no questions, no doubt. Or maybe you didn't understand anything. That was one of my teachers used to say, he encouraged, cautions, debate, and sometimes he would say any debate, any cautions, to the point that he explains, and of course sometimes we have some caution, sometimes we don't have. So when there is silent, no one, then he says, it is a sign of two things. Either you understood everything very well, or that you have not understood anything. Otherwise, you will have cautions. But when you don't understand anything, you don't have cautions. When you understood everything, then you don't have cautions. Yes. Yes,
A comment.
yes, please.
In my work, I work with people who are in conflict, and often that conflict happens because someone behaves poorly, or multiple people behave poorly. But I also see that it's like the conflict is an opportunity, and so sometimes someone behaves poorly, and there's a conflict, and it's like a kind of gift that they did it because something then changes as a result of the process of working through the conflict. So it's sort of just a comment, like there can be something good when someone misbehaves in a way, and that in a way it's like there has to be some room for misconduct in order to give people the gift of going through that conflict.
Maybe with the next subject, maybe we might come with that in the next paramita with the patience. That can be related with that too a little bit. I think what I would say is, or my view is, if there is no obstacle, if there's no problem, if there's no suffering, that would be best. But there will be obstacle, there will be suffering, there will be problems. So when there is, then